And we are back. It is the Football Diehards DFS show. It is, what are we heading into? Week 8 now? Halfway through the season? Week 8? Yeah, so we are, we're pretty much at the halfway point. For most NFL teams, they're at the halfway point. How did week 7 treat you?
It was pretty good, and we talked about it last week. Like, there was going to be a lot of high-scoring games, and there sure was. And there was a lot of high-scoring DraftKings scores out there. I personally had my best week of the year, but it seemed like a lot of people did as well. Like, I put up like a 230 lineup, like on any given week that would have done fantastic, but was still able to make some profit. But I'm hopefully get a takedown this week. That'd be nice.
Yeah, still searching for a takedown as well. I've had some good showdown slates. That's been played a lot of showdown lately. I think showdown's one of the more beatable formats, so I'm getting into that. But we are here to talk about the main slate. We have, I would say, a more tempered scoring expectation on this slate. Relative to last week where everyone scored, but just looking at the Vegas totals as well, there isn't anything absurd like the 57.5. I think we saw Green Bay get up to. So let's dive into it. The first game I have on my list of games is Indianapolis versus Detroit. Indy 2.5-point favorites. The game does have a 50-point total, but as far as the 50-plus totals go, this is one that I am probably less interested in than maybe any other one. I just see Phillip Rivers, who seems completely done at this point. I don't know what he can offer. A guy even like T.Y. Hilton, who has 2 games of 9 and 10 targets, and he hasn't hit 100 yards yet. He really just hasn't done much, and they're getting guys like Marcus Johnson and Zach Pascal involved. And on the other side, if we don't expect Phillip Rivers to do much, if we look to the other side, it's okay, but it's, Detroit has a 23.75 implied team total. They split their backfield, and Kenny Golladay has yet to see over 8 targets. Am I crazy for thinking this game is just meh?
No, not at all. I actually think that, the under could be a good look. The Colts defense is pretty good. I think they're a little bit overrated, but on the Colts side, really, I'm not touching Rivers. I'm not touching the passing game. It's really hard to trust him. I like Jonathan Taylor at 6,600 is something you could look at. It's just the problem is he's not getting as much touches as you'd like. 16 touches last week, 15 the week before. You'd like him to get up in that 20 range, but still, really good matchup here against Detroit, so I think he's fine. On the Lions side, like I said, I'm not too high on the Colts defense, so I'm not overly scared, and I think they'll come in a little bit over or a little bit underlooked here. And Kenny Golladay, 6,600 is somebody I really want to talk about. He's someone who's been very, very consistent since coming back, 17, 16, 17, and 20 points. He still hasn't had that big breakout game that we should be seeing soon. Could this be the week against the Colts defense? Maybe. I think if it does, it's probably at really low ownership. Especially there's some guys around him that we'll talk about that, it could be a nice pivot there. Swift at 5,300 could be fine as well. And then on defense, I guess you can go with the Lions, 2,500. Rivers looks absolutely awful, so I guess that could be a defense you could target there.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm more looking at this game from both defenses. The Colts playing good defense, but they've also beaten up on terrible teams. Like Kirk Cousins played awful against them, I believe. They got to face Chicago, and that was a miserable game as well. Played the Jets, so I think their strength of schedule kind of masks that their defense is good, but it's nothing special. On the other side, yeah, they face Phillip Rivers. Maybe DeAndre Swift could correlate with the Detroit defense. But frankly, I don't know. This is just 2 teams that I really haven't targeted much in DFS, and it has mostly been profitable for me. Outside of one DeAndre Swift game, it really has been totally fine going full fades on both these teams the entirety of the year. So I will probably keep that up. We have one more game that unfortunately these 2 go back-to-back in the list I'm reading from, Buffalo versus New England. Buffalo, 4-point favorites, a 43-point total, I think is the lowest on the slate. And as favorites, 23.5 implied team total. I think Buffalo has the lowest implied team total of a favorite on the slate. Josh Allen has played like Josh Allen, like what we expected from Josh Allen heading into the year. Erratic, but more skewing towards negative plays with some high upside in the past 2 weeks, as opposed to we saw for the first 5 weeks of the season, he was just on fire. You could not stop this man. Hasn't been the case in the past 2 weeks. Do we see a Josh Allen rebound, or was the first 4 weeks just randomness, random running hot? And do you have any interest in this game?
Yeah, I have a little bit of interest, and this is kind of a game I do want to stay away from. I kind of am interested in Josh Allen. Like you mentioned, he's been playing, not as good as he had been at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, he was getting some MVP talk, so I'm kind of, dwindled down a little bit, scoring, 20, 16, and 18. Could be a decent bounce back spot. The Patriots defense is pretty solid. The only thing I'll say about Allen is he'll be very low owned. I think his, Stephon Diggs is somebody that's going to be very low owned. It's always in play. So if you want to get a little bit different, I'll get off some of the chalk. I think the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stack could be something to look at. But other than that, I'm going to stay away from this game. I see a lot of people on Cam Newton this week. I'm not one of those people. 5,700 is a little bit interesting for the rushing upside, but man, did he look awful last week. I think he had like 2 DraftKings points.
Yeah, I mean, Newton has played horribly. Josh Allen has not played particularly great since that hot start. The only guy I really have much interest here is Stephon Diggs, but if there's one thing that the Patriots can still do, it's take away a top option. Like we saw that with Darren Waller. And I guess that's a perfect transition to our next game because I can't find any interest in Buffalo versus New England, frankly. Darren Waller and the Las Vegas Raiders. 2.5-point underdogs to Cleveland. Now we start getting into interesting totals, a 52.5-point total. We have kind of an interesting proposition here where Derek Carr at 5,500, I believe, is right now projecting to be one of the more popular quarterback plays because he's so cheap and people want to play your Derrick Henrys, your Alvin Kamaras. Those guys are expensive. You got to save money somewhere. Derek Carr in a game with a 52.5-point total. He's played well. I believe he's top 10 in yards per attempt. Is he someone you can consider playing despite maybe having a moniker as just a game manager, a low upside play?
Yeah, I mean, the ownership kind of does scare me because I see a ton of people on him, but it's really hard not to play him at 5,500. I really liked Joe Burrow last week. He was 5,500 against that Cleveland pass defense that is just not great at all. I don't expect him to go out there and, put up those Joe Burrow numbers, but, he's been pretty consistent throughout the year, averaging 21.1 DraftKings points. He hasn't been bad. I don't really understand this price tag, and you're getting a very, very good matchup. So I kind of do understand the chalk. And yeah, Darren Waller. I mean, Cleveland is one of the worst teams versus the tight end. 5,600. I typically don't pay up for a tight end, but this is barely paying up. 5,600 is kind of cheap here for Waller here, who's going to get a ton of targets against a very good matchup in Cleveland. So I'm really liking that Carr and Waller stack. On the Brown side, I think Higgins at 4,200 is a nice value play there. I think he could be kind of popular. And then one of my favorite running back plays on the slate is Kareem Hunt. 6,900. I think he's way too cheap still. Had a pretty solid game last game. 19.2 DraftKings points. I believe he caught a touchdown. And he was on the field for 90% of the snaps last week. That's something you absolutely love from a running back. And I think the price is way too cheap. I think the matchup is fantastic. In a high-scoring game, I think he has multiple touchdown upside here. But yeah, he's going to be very, very popular, I'd imagine. Probably haven't looked at the ownership, and I'm guessing he's going to be top 3 owned running back this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at ownership right now. I'm seeing Kareem Hunt, and this could very much change because the ownership I'm looking at also has like Dalvin Cook as super low owned. Once we get news on guys like, Joe Mixon almost certainly being out, Aaron Jones potentially being out, we'll wait and see on him. Chris Carson kind of fits the same bill. Things will change as we get ownership in. You can find ownership on footballdiehards.com. Go ahead and check that out. So I think you have to be a subscriber. So please go ahead and subscribe to Football Diehards. We are now running, I forget what it was last week, but we are running a discount because we are halfway through the season. Please go ahead and check that out. You can get our ownership, lots of great content there. And I would assume once you find the ownership, you will find out that Kareem Hunt could be the most popular play on the slate at the running back position. I don't think that's terrible. He's averaging, I believe, 17 carries and around about 3 or 4 targets a game. And that's mostly because they've still been winning under Kareem Hunt. I think if they were to get in a deficit, you still have a great receiving floor. I don't really expect it to happen this game, but it could happen. So the spread's only 2.5. So Kareem Hunt, I think the ownership is warranted. He's cheap. He's going to get a ton of volume. He's in a good enough matchup. My only concern is that I don't love attacking this game from the Raiders passing perspective simply because anytime you tell me that the field wants to jam in Derek Carr, I find so many ways for Derek Carr to fail. Not even that he's bad. He has been good this year. And not only that, he's been a top 10 or 15 passer by a lot of metrics. It's simply that they're road dogs to a Cleveland defense. Well, although they do allow a lot of passing yards, they can also get pressure. They're top 10 in sacks. They are number 1 in takeaways. When you tell me all that needs to happen is Myles Garrett to go off for a day to kill all of the Derek Carr lineups, all of the Darren Waller lineups, even Josh Jacobs coming in as a top 5, potentially top 10 most popular running back play, all that needs to happen is for one game, the Browns defense needs to play well, and they have all the talent to do so. I'm absolutely going to bet on that because I know that if I bet on, say, a Browns defense Kareem Hunt stack, I still get a great running back play, but I can essentially kill off a ton of the Derek Carr lineups, essentially all of them if he doesn't have a good day. Because if he busts, all of the lineups that play him are certainly not going to be beating my best lineup. So I kind of like shorting the Raiders side of things by playing Kareem Hunt, Browns defense, or potentially even just running Browns defense as a one-off, although I do like the correlation. On to our next game. Minnesota versus Green Bay. This is a game that I am not going to slander anymore. I have slandered 2 games and then mostly slandered the Raiders. I will not on this game, I promise. Green Bay versus Minnesota. The game has a 52.5-point total. Green Bay are 6.5-point favorites. What do you make of what we saw last week from Jamal Williams with Aaron Jones out? it looks like Aaron Jones isn't going to play this week, but I say that very tentatively. You have the show with Emil on Sunday mornings. If you're watching this right now, or even after the fact, and you don't know if Aaron Jones is going to play, find Brady on the Football Die Hard show Sunday mornings to find out. With that being said, what do you make of Jamal Williams? What do you make of Davante Adams absolutely just balling out? Can we go back to Green Bay as likely chalk?
Yeah, it was awesome last week. I had a ton of Davante Adams. Absolutely went off. I think I had 47.6 DraftKings points. And the problem this week I'm having is there's really not much value I'm liking at running back. So I'm finding it kind of hard to go up and get Davante Adams. But if you can go up and get him, I mean, he has a really good matchup. I remember the last time he played Minnesota, I believe it was in week 1. He scored 44.6 DraftKings points, and that's some kind of upside you can expect from Davante Adams. You can expect the 10 plus targets, probably even like 15 plus targets. I mean, the amount of targets he's getting is insane. So Davante Adams, if you can go up for him, I think is a fantastic play. On the Minnesota side, Dalvin Cook, I believe he is going to play. In a game that should score decently high. I'm actually pretty interested in Dalvin Cook when he's been healthy. He's been really good, averaging 24.1 DraftKings points. And like you mentioned earlier, his ownership seems a little bit low. I think that could, go up a little bit, but I still think it'll be lower owned than guys like Kamara, guys like Derrick Henry. So I think a really nice pivot would be going to Dalvin Cook. Other than that, if Aaron Jones does not play, I think Williams is fine at 6,100, although he will, bring in a ton of ownership, did really well last week, scoring 21.4 DraftKings points. So just going to have to wait throughout the week. You see the Jones news. If Jones is out, I'll probably, plug Williams into cash, play him in a solid amount of tournaments as well.
Yeah, one point I will add is I guess two. I'll add 2 points. One, Jones is now, or I guess Jamal Williams is now 6,100. I would hope, and I hope for a specific reason, that people see that and they realize that Jones, or I keep calling him Jones, Jamal Williams last week was like 4,500, and they say, I didn't pay this much for him last week. I'm not paying this much for him this week, because I think Jamal Williams just smashes again in the same exact spot. Another high-scoring game against an inferior defense where they're big favorites. It's exactly what we saw last week. I believe he got 19 carries and like 5 targets. A.J. Dillon was modestly involved as a runner. They have no guys who are going to take away targets from him. I will gladly pay 6,100, and I hope that the field doesn't do that, although, I mean, they probably should. So I still think I'd be fine with eating Jamal Williams chalk, even if he does end up being popular, because I don't think we're going to see Aaron Jones, but no confirmation from me yet on which way Aaron Jones ends up going. Green Bay does notably play very conservative with holding their players out with injury. Davante Adams a few weeks ago said that he was totally fine to play, and the trainer said he wasn't playing anyways. So one other thing I'll add now, my second point, Marquez Valdes-Scantling has burned me a lot in the past few weeks. He is still a top 10 air yard share player. This is only if Allen Lazard doesn't come back. He returned to practice, but I'm not sure if he's been activated off of IR yet. And even if he has been, you have 21 days to come back, actually to be playing after coming off of IR. If he doesn't play, probably going to go back to the Marquez Valdes-Scantling well, because I think you can even run, it's very feasible, and we saw this win last week. You can run a Jamal Williams Marquez Valdes-Scantling stack that will get you off of the Davante Adams chalk and provide you very good leverage off of him. Last week we saw the Million Maker winner had Jamal Williams and Davante Adams, no Aaron Rodgers. So I think it's interesting to approach some games as I want pieces of this, but whether it be because of the game script, whether it be because of the price, you can still play multiple players from the same team and not have the quarterback. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Jamal Williams would be a cheeky way to leverage some of the Davante Adams ownership. On the other side, only one other player I will throw out to you. I like Irv Smith a lot. I like Adam Thielen. I like Justin Jefferson. I think they're both great plays, but people probably know they're going to be great plays. Irv Smith has now gotten 5 targets in back-to-back games. I don't think they played last week, and he's run over 30 routes in back-to-back games. Those are all season highs and highs dating back to week 8 or 9 of last year. He seems to once again be pushing Kyle Rudolph to the fringes. Do you think it's possible that we see a full-time Irv Smith role, and are you interested in playing him at, I believe, 3K?
Yeah, 3K, of course I am. I mean, I do think, they're starting to trust him a little bit more, play him a little bit more. Yeah, 11 DraftKings points in week 6, 10 in week 5. Before that, he was scoring zeros. Yeah, they're starting to use him a little bit more. So at 3,000, if you're going to get 5 targets, I'd be happy with a couple targets. But 5 each week, yeah, give me 5 targets at 3K.
Yeah, and we talked about it briefly. I fall into the same camp as you do, where I'm typically not looking to pay up for tight end unless they're in the absolute smash spot. A few weeks ago, Travis Kelce, I thought, in a great spot. I think it was the Raiders game, I might be wrong, was actually in a great spot because there weren't a ton of great alternatives. If we're going to get low-owned, low-price Irv Smith in a complete shootout where they're actually forced to pass, I think he is totally viable. I think you could argue Harrison Bryant as long as Austin Hooper doesn't play. I don't think he's going to play. Appendicitis is the diagnosis or whatever. Harrison Bryant maybe fills that role. I think there are some other players we could potentially talk about. I'm typically looking, especially because the high-priced tight ends are going to be so chalky this week, I'm typically looking for ways to get different off of that. Irv Smith, one of maybe only a handful, but one of a handful of ways to do that. Next game, probably my favorite low-scoring game if we're going to be picking potentially uglier games to target for low ownership. Baltimore versus Pittsburgh. The total has come down to 46 after opening at 49. Baltimore, 3.5-point favorites. Not projected to be a landslide of scoring here. Not like the game we just talked about, not like some of the games we will talk about moving forward. But we have two above average, if not at least like maybe potentially elite quarterbacks, at least one in Lamar Jackson versus Ben Roethlisberger. And I do believe that in the long run, talented quarterbacks and talented offenses, both of which these are, will beat good defenses just on the median. That's like what we see, Patrick Mahomes shows us every week. No matter what defense he plays, it simply doesn't matter. I think that is potentially the case here. I don't think either of the quarterbacks we're going to see are Patrick Mahomes, and these are two good defenses, but there are a lot of good values. Lamar Jackson at 7,400, I believe, is the cheapest he has been all year, and probably dating back to like early last year, because this probably shot up quite quickly. He went over the 100-yard rushing bonus the last time we saw him. His passing numbers have come down, but he's still Pro Football Focus's number 13 graded quarterback. He's still throwing touchdowns at over a 6% rate. He's not the Lamar Jackson we saw last year, but at lowered price, at lowered ownership, he doesn't have to be. He just has to come close, or he has to do it for one game. He doesn't have to do it for the entirety of the season. Are you buying at any point, this game or potentially any game in the future? Like, is Lamar Jackson just like meh, or is he actually worth paying $7,400 for?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you mentioned, this is the cheapest he's ever been. And this is a kind of a game I think it's going to be really sneaky. People are going to look at the both defenses. Steelers have one of the best defenses in the league. Same thing with Baltimore. I think that's going to take away a lot of ownership. So just from that perspective, I think this game is very intriguing. I really like Deontay Johnson. I know he gets hurt all the time, but when he's healthy, and we touched on this last week, like he went out there at 4,200 last week. He scored 29 points, 15 targets. So Deontay Johnson, if he's healthy and playing, I'm probably going to go back to him because it looks like he's Ben Roethlisberger's number one target in Pittsburgh there. And I'm not overly scared of Baltimore's defense. Lamar Jackson is very interesting because at 7,400 with that rushing yard upside, and he's going to be so low owned, like it's going to be crazy. So I'm kind of interested in Lamar Jackson. Maybe Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews is someone else who's going to be low owned, a stack, or maybe Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown. But just looking at it from like a getting different perspective is how I look at it. But I think I'm gonna have a little bit of this game. I'm not gonna go crazy on it, but I think it's a good way to get different.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that if we're going to see Lamar Jackson at 2-3% ownership, I'll probably push myself up to, 10+% ownership on him. One, because he's incredible. But two, I do think this is an edge that goes like underutilized or misunderstood, is that with a guy like Lamar Jackson, you don't need to get a lot of decisions right to have your Lamar Jackson stacks be right. Whereas if I'm stacking Pittsburgh, we saw last week it was Juju Smith-Schuster has just finally had a good game. He saw like 14 or 15 targets. The weeks before that, Chase Claypool, 1 touchdown and 4 touchdowns. Deontay Johnson, when he's healthy, like 10, 13, and as you said, 15 targets, I believe, in the past 3 games that he has finished, or I think he actually left like a handful of plays before they finished versus the Titans. But when he finishes, he gets a ton of targets. Simply playing Ben Roethlisberger and him going off doesn't guarantee that you have the perfect lineup. Playing Lamar Jackson for the most part does. You have 2 viable options. We have Mark Andrews seeing over 20% of the targets. He is one of the 4 guys priced over 5,500, and he's going to be the least owned of them. And you have Marquise Brown, 6,100, is seeing the highest percentage of his team's air yards in the entire NFL at 45%. You really don't need to deviate from those 2 guys. I'm fine with single and double stacks with him. There's not much else I'm looking for at this point, so if I call my Lamar Jackson shot correctly, I probably have a great stack. And I agree, Deontay Johnson seeing so much work. He's kind of been the constant while Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, and Chase Claypool all trade off good games. When he finishes games, he's averaging well over 12 targets per game. It's absolutely smashing. So I think Deontay Johnson's still at an elevated price. I think he's 55 or 600. I'm just going to keep going back to him. They should price him like Keenan Allen. He's seeing that kind of volume. Until he gets to that price and the requisite ownership of a player like that, I'm keep going back to the well. Even if I'm not playing Lamar Jackson stacks, if in lineups that aren't Lamar Jackson stacks, I'll probably still be over the field on Deontay Johnson. Our next game here is Titans versus Bengals. Interesting game we have because, the Bengals, 5.5-point underdogs, 53.5-point totals, come down a few points. A lot of the totals have come down this week. you would expect Derrick Henry to probably have an incredible game. They are favorites versus a Bengals defense that does not scare me in the slightest. And then on the other side, there are quite obvious run backs. There are like really three probably choices if you're not looking to do double running back. What do you make of this game that sets up to be both like obviously chalky, but it makes sense? Like Derrick Henry as a favorite should smash. The Bengals as underdogs should pass 45 times. Are you trying to get different in this game, or are you fine eating the chalk?
I'm probably going to eat some chalk here. I see, a lot of love for Derrick Henry, and rightfully so. I mean, when he's on, he is on. And like you said, they're going to be favorites in this game. That's where you want to play Derrick Henry in a game that they should be ahead, because that means they're going to run the ball, less passing, and he has that high upside. It's probably between Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry between in cash, and I'm probably going to go on the Kamara side just because Derrick Henry is not really someone that's going to go out there and catch balls like Kamara is going to catch like 8 to 10 balls, where you see Derrick Henry maybe getting a couple catches per game. So in tournaments, I'm going to have a decent amount of Henry, although he's going to be a little bit chalky. Other than that, on the Cincinnati side, I really liked Joe Burrow last week. He had an absolute great game, 38 DraftKings points. And I think you can play Joe Burrow on really any given week just because he throws the ball a million times per game. 6,200 is not bad. So I will be having some Joe Burrow. And like you said, there's a bunch of stacking options. AJ Green is someone who I really like at 4,500. And we talked about him early in the year, and he was doing awful, but he's finally started to get it together. Joe Burrow is starting to finally have a nice connection with AJ Green, scoring 15 DraftKings points last week versus Cleveland, 17 versus the Colts, 24 targets in the last 2 weeks. So I think AJ Green is like one of my favorite value wide receivers. And of course, you have guys like Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins are also in play. Like when you're getting so many targets per game, they're always going to be in play there. So maybe look at some Burrow stacks. And on the Tennessee side, I think Derrick Henry is a good option. I think A.J. Brown's fine. 6,900 is a little bit too expensive, but I do have a lot of interest in this game as a whole.
Yeah, I think this game, my only approach that may be contrarian is I'd probably prefer, in my opinion, to take the AJ Brown, Ryan Tannehill route. Jonnu Smith's price is coming down. He's a touchdown monster. Even if that touchdown isn't necessarily like we shouldn't expect him to score like multiple touchdowns in a game going forward. You should never predict that. But he's not going to be incredibly high owned, and his price is coming down. So both of those reflect the natural touchdown regression. I'm fine buying into 1 week if he's going to be in my Ryan Tannehill stacks. If Tannehill goes off, necessarily almost, you're probably going to see a Jonnu Smith touchdown. And I think that is another way to find leverage off of the Derrick Henry lineups, simply because anytime we get like a guy over or at 8K going to be owned by a quarter of the field and he projects for 1.5 catches or whatever, I think that is an awesome time to probably have him run for like 150 yards and bury me once again this season. But his projection is just so it's fragile. It simply is. If he doesn't break a long run, if his team doesn't have a lead, if he doesn't score multiple times, all of these are ways for him to fail. And you talked about it. Alvin Kamara simply doesn't have those ways. If his team is winning, he's probably got 15 to 20 carries and a touchdown. If his team is losing, he has double-digit catch upside. Right now, he's on pace for over 1,200 yards, and I think 126 catches. Those are both record-setting numbers. If he does finish the season with them, he'd also fall at 8 touchdowns, just one shy of the NFL record. All of these for running backs, obviously. I think he's simply a better play at the same price at similar ownership. So for that reason, in conjunction with playing Alvin Kamara, I'm probably trying to leverage the Derrick Henry ownership by playing the opposite correlation. If they are leading and they are having a good game, probably means to see a lot of Derrick Henry. If they are not, or if it's a competitive game, Ryan Tannehill succeeds. They can both go off in the same game, but I do think they're negatively correlated based on the way Tennessee wants to play. I'm probably going to have some Ryan Tannehill stacks and just really, really dread Derrick Henry jamming it in my face again. He's really good. He is really freaking good. He's just more fragile than a guy like Alvin Kamara, and I will bet against that when I can. On the other side, you mentioned AJ Green at 4,500 looks like a cash consideration play. 24 targets over the past 2 weeks. Also leads the NFL in air yards over the past 2 weeks. And unlike early in the season when he was racking up air yards and was downright awful, he's actually number 8, I believe, in receivers in receiving yards over the past 2 weeks. So maybe AJ Green's back at 4,500. He's probably a guy who you can get to in cash because he opens up so much of the rest of the good plays. Let's move on. Let me see what I have here next. Oh, this is awful. Kansas City versus the Jets. Kansas City, 19.5-point favorites. Man, 19.5 points is a lot of points. And still, because they're projected to score so many points, a 49-point total. My only question is, what do you make of a team that is expensive with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes both being costly at the onesie positions? Tyreek Hill coming down in price a little bit, but his role isn't that robust. They're so expensive, and they may only play a half of a football game. What do you even do with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, 19.5 point favorites, that is insane. Obviously, the biggest favorite we've seen all year. So that kind of worries me because if they do get out too big of a lead, they're going to start playing conservative. Mahomes can even probably sit the fourth quarter if they're up by that much. So I'm not overly interested in. I think it'll be low owned, but still, I'm not going to probably not going to target this game. I guess the only thing I'm looking at for value is Denzel Mims. 3,200. I think that Crowder is questionable. He might not play. I think Perriman, I think he got a concussion last week. I think he might not play. So if both of those guys are out, they're going to be trailing. Garbage time upside. We're going to be throwing the ball a ton more than likely. And Mims actually looks pretty solid there. So 3,200 if they're all out, I think is probably a really good play at that price.
As I agree, it's difficult to buy into much in this game. Denzel Mims very interesting, especially if Jamison Crowder misses. But it sounds like you were just lukewarm on these Chiefs, just because like we saw Chad Henne get in the game last week as the backup quarterback, and they were playing the Broncos. The Broncos with their backup quarterback have already beaten the Jets, so that should tell you something about how terrible the Jets are. And like the same thing happened last week where Travis Kelce was a popular, expensive tight end play, and he busted simply because like the Broncos were terrible. They were downright awful. And guys there were like three tight ends to outscore Travis Kelce in that game. Not because he's not good, but because he didn't have to play the end of the game. That could be the similar situation this week. I'm probably just staying away from old Chiefs. Let's move on. Let's move on to Miami versus Los Angeles, a game that I don't have a ton of interest in, but I will throw this to you. Tua Tagovailoa, what do you expect to see from him in this game?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of interested in. And first of all, I don't know why they would bench Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like he actually has been pretty solid this season, so that kind of made me a little upset there because I'm a big Fitzmagic fan there. But yeah, I'm probably not going to play much Tua. I'm probably just going to sit back and see how he does. I think the Rams defense is pretty solid. 5,600. I mean, it's intriguing, but I'd probably rather take the chalk and go Carr there. So I'm going to sit back, see how he plays. And really, in this game, I'm like not interested in anything. I think if you want to go the Goff route with Cooper Kupp Woods, I think they'll be low owned. But other than that, I'm not overly interested. I guess I really want to touch on Miami's running back Myles Gaskin at 5,200. Like I mentioned earlier, there isn't much value at running back. I think this is a guy you can definitely go to just based off the volume alone. 24 total touches in week 6. He had 21 touches in week 5, and he had 27 touches in week 3 there. So he's getting around 20 touches per game. So I think Gaskin just at 5,200. I know it's not the best matchup in the world, but the Rams' run defense isn't all that impressive to me. So Myles Gaskin is somebody I'm looking at. And other than that, maybe the Dolphins' defense at 2,400 for a punt defense, I guess. But other than that, I'm not really interested in this game as a whole.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The Rams, they run the football a lot, which could lead you to some Darrell Henderson, but he essentially doesn't catch passes. Malcolm Brown plays almost the entirety of their pass catching and pass blocking role. So you really are needing like 100 yards and a touchdown from Darrell Henderson. If we see Cam Akers get more involved, he wasn't really. I think he played like 3 snaps the last time they played. But essentially, you are trying to really thread the needle as just a rusher, not really as a pass catcher with Darrell Henderson. So even though they run a lot, it doesn't always funnel entirely to Henderson because Malcolm Brown gets involved. We saw Cam Akers involved early. It leads me away from them. Gaskin, not a bad play. His team's an underdog, so it's not great for him, but he does catch passes quite well. I don't think he's the worst play, and we definitely are thirsty for value on this slate. I'm going to move on to, I wish, can't Justin Herbert play a good opponent this week? Because he's been incredible. He's been throwing dimes, just dishing. He's not that expensive yet. I think he's like in the high 6K range. His team has like Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is maybe where we should start because if you're going to look at anyone, his team has given Keenan Allen the ball so much. He's averaging over 13 targets per game in games he finishes with Justin Herbert. That would be the NFL record pace if he were to do it over 16 games. Obviously, that doesn't include the first game with Tyrod Taylor, and it doesn't include like week 5, I think, where he basically missed the entirety of the game. But if you look at his per game pace with Justin Herbert and when healthy, he looks like one of the most used, if not the most used receiver in the NFL, like borderline historical. He's Michael Thomas, he's Devontae Adams, he's all of these things. Just hasn't quite seen the touchdowns. He's only scored twice with Justin Herbert in the lineup, despite Justin Herbert throwing multiple touchdowns to Donald Parham, to Jalen Guyton. I think Joe Reed maybe has scored at some point. All of these guys are scoring except for Keenan Allen and potentially Mike Williams. How do you feel about playing the Chargers, like the obvious Chargers plays? Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen. Is the fact that none of them are scoring while Jalen Guyton and Donald Parham do concern you at all?
No, it doesn't really concern me because you'd think that they'd start scoring. I don't think it's going to happen, more than often. And Herbert's somebody I really liked last week. He did really well, scoring 41.50 DraftKings points. They did price him up about 500 in salary. The matchup, it's not the best match in the world. I think if you want to go to it, it'll be really low owned. And Keenan Allen looks to be like one of the best wide receivers plays on the slate. I really don't understand this price. I mean, he's getting so many targets. 13 in week 7, 11 in week 4, 19 in week 3. The targets are unreal. I'm just going to plug Keenan Allen in cash. You're going to get a very good floor there with the targets he's receiving, averaging 18.2 DraftKings points. Hunter Henry seems like he's way too cheap as well, although he's not really getting into the end zone, only one touchdown on the year. Would love to see him get in the end zone this week at 4,200. That'd be nice. He's getting a decent amount of targets himself. So I am looking at Henry. I'm looking at Allen. On the Denver side, I think Philip Lindsay is questionable. If he does not play, it should give Melvin Gordon more opportunity here at 5,600. Should get around 20 touches, decent value play there. Not overly excited for it, but just someone to look at nonetheless. But Keenan Allen for me, and a possible Hunter Henry at tight end for some value there.
Yeah, I really want to play Justin Herbert. He's played so well. The only problem is the run back options are like Jerry Jeudy, maybe Tim Patrick, although I think he's dinged up as well. Like Noah Fant, who left the game with an injury at some point, and then he tweeted out that he's fine, I think. Even if all these guys are healthy, or if only one of them are healthy and get a lot of targets, those targets come from Drew Lock. Drew Lock just doesn't look like a starting caliber quarterback. Do you have any interest in stacking this game? Because I have to say, as much as I love Herbert, facing the Denver Broncos, not because I'm too afraid of their defense, but because their offense just seems unlikely to put up a fight, makes it hard to stack. Do you have any interest in stacking this game? Could you stack Herbert without the run back?
Personally, probably not. The run back options are just awful. I'm probably just going to take like a Keenan Allen, get him in a lineup, or maybe a Hunter Henry. Other than that, probably not going to play much of this game. But I think it could be interesting. It's just the run back options are not looking so great on it.
Yeah, they're quite scuffed. This Denver offense is terrible. Let's move on to New Orleans versus Chicago. Another game, just meh. Maybe the only notable thing here, two notable things. One, Michael Thomas. I know last week they said this week wasn't looking great, so I don't think we'll see him. I don't think we have any official ruling on him yet. Doesn't look like we'll see him. Allen Robinson right now in concussion protocol. I forget. I think it's concussion protocol. Would potentially open up some volume for guys like Jimmy Graham, Anthony Miller, Darnell Mooney, none of whom are like wildly expensive, none of whom are incredibly exciting either. But any interest in the Chicago side, and I think, we talked about Alvin Kamara already. He's an awesome play. The dude's good at football, man.
Yeah, he really is. Really in this game, it's Kamara. That's about it. If Michael Thomas plays, 7,300 is a very interesting play. We talked about it, the past couple of weeks because he's been expected to play and has not been playing. He opened up the season at 9,000 in salary. You're getting a nice discount on 7,300. He's a little beat up. I don't know what's going on with him, but he could come in at low ownership. He has the opportunity to go off. And other than that, like if Robinson doesn't play it, like you said, it does open up some things. I think Mooney at 3,500 could be a decent option. So just going to kind of sit back, wait for the injury news, and see what kind of value opens up. Obviously not interested in guys like Montgomery. Obviously not Murray, and just going to stay away from Drew Brees and Nick Foles as well.
Yeah, I agree. Neither of the quarterbacks. Maybe Drew Brees just because he doesn't have a receiver that is like awfully interesting. It's mostly just the offense runs through Alvin Kamara and even some Latavius Murray. Drew Brees, I don't think is bad. It's just this game environment doesn't look great with the 43.5 point total. And Nick Foles is like actually bad. He's just not good. So I'm like, I don't have much interest there. Mooney, he's fast. He runs a 4.38. He was impressive, or at least a mildly impressive college prospect. And to do what he's doing as a rookie, which is get volume, which is it should be an indicator of talent. If you can get on the field, if you can get looks, even if Nick Foles can't complete them, it would indicate to me that he is fairly talented. He's a speedy guy. If he picks up extra targets, it doesn't take much for him to pay off that 3,500 price tag. He's a fine play, but I do think I would just reserve him to like a way to make my Alvin Kamara lineups a bit more unique, at a dash of correlation, just a little sprinkle of correlation. The next game we have, Seattle versus San Francisco. Seattle, -3 point favorites, 53 point total in this game. Has come down 1 point. Most of the totals at this point have come down just a little bit. This game, what do you make of what Tyler Lockett did? It was a historic performance. 15 catches, 200 yards on the dot, I believe, and 3 scores. he completely shut down DK Metcalf, his own teammate, because of what he did. Can you look back to DK Metcalf and maybe let me jump in here and answer? Yes, I think he makes a very interesting leverage play. Maybe that's what I'll throw to you. Not can you look back to Metcalf. Would you use him as a leverage play off of Lockett, who is certainly going to be popular coming off of an annihilation? One of the best performances we have literally ever seen, given that he went for 200 yards and caught 15 balls and scored 3 times. But DK Metcalf still leads the team in air yards with like 170 air yard gap between him and Lockett, despite the quiet game versus Lockett's blow-up spot. I like him as leverage. Am I crazy for trying to get off of Lockett?
No, not at all. I actually was going to bring that up. And yeah, Lockett, 56 DraftKings points, 20 targets, 15 receptions, 200 yards. Man, do I wish I had Lockett because I had none. I had more Metcalf than Lockett, if anything. But yeah, I'm with you 100%. Going back to Metcalf, he's even more expensive than Lockett, which kind of surprises me after the performance last week. And I think a lot of people are going to be drawn towards that Lockett performance, leaving Metcalf the lower owned out of the two. So definitely looking at Metcalf as I think he'll have some ownership, but kind of a lower owned play, of at least lower owned than Lockett, I'd imagine. On the 49ers side, I don't know. Jimmy Garoppolo is very interesting going against the Seattle defense, who is absolutely awful against the pass. I believe they're like ranked 32nd in DraftKings points given up against the quarterbacks and wide receivers. And somebody I really like, Brandon Ayuk, at 5,800. I believe Samuel's not going to play. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities. Somebody, averaging 12.7 DraftKings points, going to get a bunch of targets this week. And then how can you not mention Kittle there? Kittle is 7,000. I think it's going to be a very good game for him. He's going to get a ton of targets, especially with the wide receivers on the 49ers beat up. He is expensive, but I do think he has a ton of upside. And this is a kind of very interesting game. I'm kind of surprised at the total, but kind of not, because this is the Seattle defense and the Seattle offense has been crazy. I'm kind of interested in Russell Wilson. Going back to him, he had a very good game as well, scoring about 35 DraftKings points. So maybe look at a Russell Wilson, Metcalf stack, run it back with Ayuk. I think that's a solid option. Get off of that Lockett chalk, and I don't know. I think Ayuk will be kind of low owned. At least I hope, because I really do like him this week.
Yeah, so far, and things can change, I haven't seen a ton of ownership on Ayuk, and I do expect him to take on pretty much the entirety of the number one receiver role with Deebo Samuel. I maybe haven't officially ruled him out yet, but at the time of the injury on Monday, they said it was a multi-week injury. So he's certainly out this week. Ayuk could see a lot of work and has been very electric on a maybe a per carry basis more than a per target basis, but he has shown a lot of upside. I think that shouldn't be surprising. He's a first round rookie and was a crazy yak monster in college. Fits perfectly with what Kyle Shanahan wants to do with his receivers and his passing game. I'll leave the final question to you. What is Kyle Shanahan doing with this backfield? He literally said that they were just resting McKinnon last week, as if they're like the Spurs resting all their dusty old veterans in the middle of a game. We saw Jarrett McKinnon get 3 carries. I think he went for -1 yards, and all of those carries came towards the end of the game, while Jeff Wilson absolutely blew up, then gets hurt. If they haven't put him on IR yet, I think they will. If not, he still won't be playing this game. What do you make of the backfield split between JaMychal Hasty, who was, the leading active player, given that Jeff Wilson didn't finish the game, was the leading active rusher for them at the end of the game? We didn't see much of Jarrett McKinnon. Does McKinnon come back to life, or is he more of just this committee guy? It's impossible to imagine that Kyle Shanahan just rested a guy, just left him active and rested him. And maybe, yes, this does have a little bit to do with me playing some Jarrett McKinnon last week. Maybe, just maybe.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and this is a kind of a riskier play because you really don't know what's going to happen. It could be, Hasty could be the guy, McKinnon could be the guy. I guess he came out and said that it's going to be McKinnon that's going to be that guy this week. Can we trust him? Probably not. So, I will have some McKinnon. I'm kind of interested, with no Wilson, with no Mostert. He should be the number one guy. You'd imagine 5,700. Probably will go there, but like I said, it's not something you want to play in cash, more of a tournament thing. I do think he has a lot of upside, but like I said, you can't trust him. Hasty might be the guy. I really don't know. It's hard to tell, but I'm going to have probably more McKinnon, if anything.
Oh, yeah, we didn't bring up Tevin Coleman. I don't think he's been activated off of IR yet. It doesn't look likely that he returns, and even if he is, it doesn't guarantee that he returns. Don't think we see him this week, so I think it's Jarrett McKinnon week. I don't feel confident in that. I would not even touch this backfield in cash. I'm probably still looking to only McKinnon in tournaments. because he's the only guy I see with having a ton of pass catching upside. I don't see JaMychal Hasty doing more than just getting, potentially double-digit carries, but I don't see him getting more than a target or two. So I guess with that, everyone, thank you for tuning in. You can find myself on Twitter at Kyle Tweets Here. You can find Brady at DFS_numbers. We will catch you guys all next week, and you can catch Brady and I believe Emil on the Sunday morning show.